Okay, welcome to ASM Live for Microbe 2017 in New Orleans. I'm Shilpa Gelwa, the Career Resources Specialist with ASM, and today we'll be discussing how to find the right career for you. If you have any questions, please use the microphone that's being passed around to ask it, or through the Facebook comment section. So today we have with us Susan Dom, a Scientific Review Officer from the Center for Scientific Review at the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Cindy Long, a Product Line Business Manager from American Type Culture Collection, also known as ATCC, and then Catherine Ventris, a research microbiologist at the National Animal Disease Center with the USDA. Before we delve into any questions, we do have one announcement to make. Dow Microbial Control is at ASM Microbe recruiting top talent microbiology PhD candidates and postdocs for full-time R&D positions. Dow is a leader in biological control solutions across multiple industries and applications. So they're going to be hosting an information session today at the courtyard in, at Courtyard Marriott on Julia Street starting at 5:30 p.m. with drinks and appetizers, and they'll be hosting interviews tomorrow. So if you guys are interested, please take your resumes over there. All right, so let's get started. The first question I have for the three of you is, can you tell us briefly what you do and how you learned about your particular career path?
Okay. Well, I'm what's referred to as an SRO, which is a Scientific Review Officer at the National Institutes of Health in the Center for Scientific Review. And basically what I do is I am a scientist, first of all, a microbiologist, and I run the study sections that reviews the grant applications that have to do with antimicrobial drug discovery and antibiotic resistance. Specifically exploratory research grants, the R21s and the R03s. I've been an SRO since September, and as part of that job, what I do is I look at the applications that are in my panel, and then I recruit reviewers that have expertise that can review those grants. And then I arrange the meeting, I run the meeting, and I make sure that, so as an SRO, I'm the designated federal official to make sure that during the meeting all the policies of the NIH are followed by the reviewers. And then at the end, I take the critiques of the reviewers and provide a summary statement or a resume of the discussion that went on during the meeting.
Okay. And how did you find your career?
How did I find it? Well, I think anyone who is doing research in faculty positions has probably submitted a grant to the NIH, and so I submitted grants to the NIH. I had grants from the NIH, and I was very well aware of what the SRO does, and I always kind of had my eye on it as something that I would do possibly, and I reached a point in my career where I said, oh, why don't I try that? Why don't I apply for that?
Okay, so did you hold a faculty position before?
So I was research faculty at the University of Chicago, and yeah.
And then you moved, okay. All right, what about you, Cindy?
I am the Product Line Business Manager for the Microbiology section at ATCC. My product line encompasses about 95,000 different products, and everything from the actual strains of viruses, bacteriology, or bacteria, fungus, protists. We're getting into newer products, genomic materials, actually the data analysis of things. So what I do is I'm responsible for the business aspect of this. I am a microbiologist, but I'm not a PhD. I'm a microbiologist with a business education, and so I do the interface between the scientific group on the R&D side, the production group, the microbiologists that are actually growing the bacteria and the viruses, the sales force, the customer base, quality, finance, being able to, I provide reports on what's selling, what's not selling. For example, last year was Zika. it was my responsibility to get the production ramped up to meet all the requirements for the researchers in the space of about 30 days. So it's a job that's constantly changing. Every day is different, and I have one person that reports to me, but I really do operate by influencing other people within my company to do things like prioritize particular products or do reports, focus on sales, that sort of thing. And I do have to say that my disclaimer is that this is my personal experience. I'm supposed to say that my views and opinions do not represent that of ATCC. So I got into the career actually by accident. I graduated from Miami University. Any Redskins out here? Miami of Ohio? No? Okay. And I loved science. I just loved science. But I'm really clumsy in the lab. So after knocking over a number of plates and trays and things like that, I started looking for jobs that would allow me to interface with science, but not involve actual lab work. So I pursued a career in sales to start with, and then as a sales rep for people, companies like Beckman and Millipore, interfaced with people inside the company that did this sort of work, and saw that they got to answer bigger questions of what if we had this product, or how would you solve this issue, understanding what's going on in the field, and then bringing those ideas and needs into the corporation for development of products.
Okay.
So.
Right. Hi everyone, so my name is Kathy Brennis. I work for the National Animal Disease Center, which is basically a part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Similarly, my views today are my personal opinion and not of the federal government. But we are basically the largest federal veterinary research center in terms of doing, we study basically animal diseases, but many of them have also zoonotic impact on humans. There's a whole range of diseases being studied in our building, and we also have folks who do diagnostic testing. But my role is on the research end, so I'm a research microbiologist. It's a little bit different than a way a faculty would be set up in a university, because we work in groups. So as opposed to having a single faculty member with the group, there's a couple of us working together. So it's me. I do a lot of the microbiology and molecular biology. Our project is on Brucella. So Brucella abortus, Brucella melitensis, which causes a lot of problems in animals and in humans around the world. But I also work with a veterinarian and a veterinary immunologist, as well as a team of other staff who are working on the project, animal caretakers, etc. So basically our goal is to work on issues that are affecting American agriculture, do experiments that are very practical. I do a lot of basic research too, but it's very tailored to practical needs, which I really like. In terms of how I got to the position, so I've been through a variety of positions before that. I mean, my position now is, I guess, what you would consider more of a traditional research career, although the government and the USDA might not be one where people might think about, but it's a great opportunity for microbiology. So I found out about the job, or at least about opportunities at USDA through a postdoc. So I did an earlier postdoc at the center where I studied prion diseases in livestock, and I really enjoyed it, and I liked working together, this cross-disciplinary nature. And then at the time, there weren't any positions open at my center, so I moved to the NIH for a little bit to do a postdoc. I really enjoyed it there, had a great experience. And then I was looking for positions, and like many of you who are listening might have the same challenge. I struggled for a long time in terms of finding a permanent position. I decided, so I've been looking for positions in a corporate environment, and I really hadn't been able to find anything. So I decided to apply for faculty positions, and I worked for a couple of years at a university in Western Maryland, which is called Frostburg State, and I did teaching and also research with students on microbiology. And then kind of to wrap up the story, this past summer when position came open back at the National Animal Disease Center, I decided to apply because I really enjoyed working there, and I was selected for my current position. And I really have enjoyed working there on the team. So it's a different topic, but it's the same sort of interdisciplinary work that I enjoy.
Okay, thank you. In terms of all of your careers or the current position that you're in right now, what do you find the most exciting on a day-to-day basis, and what do you find the most challenging with your job right now?
Well, I guess I'll start since I'm next to you.
Yep.
I think the most exciting thing is I receive a very large group of grant applications from applicants from both the United States and outside the United States of fantastic skill and expertise, and I'm getting exposed to ideas at the beginning of a project, especially since they're exploratory applications. Some of them are very exciting, and so I also get to interact. It's a very social job, so I get to interact with the reviewers and recruiting them, as well as the investigators who might call to ask about the grant application process before the review. So as part of the rule, I'm not allowed to talk to applicants after the review, but I'm there to help them understand applying the rules of NIH and things like that before the review. So that's very exciting.
What about challenging?
Challenging, it's, I've only been there since September.
Yeah, you
so
started fairly new.
I've been in academia for 23 years. And so the transfer over to a new type of job, there's a lot of things to learn about it that weren't part of being in academia. But for the most part, it's straightforward, and I feel like, what I've done before has prepared me for it. Probably one of the most challenging things is this last round in the summer, getting reviewers to come. So, it's voluntary. When people do review, it's completely voluntary, and so you have to time it so that it's not during ASM. Your meeting isn't during ASM or American Society for Virology and things like that. So that's probably the most challenging thing right now.
What about you, Cindy?
Exciting.
Yes,
Every day is different. As much as I have a core set of responsibilities, challenges arise with customer demands, i.e. Zika. That was quite an experience for us, is coming up with the amount of Zika to address the needs of the entire global research community. And so, understanding those processes of production and so forth.
What was that process like in terms of, once the news came out about Zika and then all the demand for it, internally, what was that process like from the company side of you?
So we had to take a look at what did exist. ATCC also handles the NIH contract called BEI, Biodefense and Emerging Infectious Diseases. So they also were involved. They had access to strains. We had the original strain from Africa, pulled it out of the freezer after it had been there for 35 years and found out that the only way that it had been grown was in suckling mice. And so finding somebody who knows how to grow virus in the brains of suckling mice was challenging. And we were able to adapt it to cell culture. We were also able to continue the animal model. And then we had to look at the new strains, look at, again, the restrictions involved in things, shipping things back and forth, finding the right depositors, getting the information out. So it was, again, the multitasking that's the part of the job that I love the most. Again, it's just always different. And so it was Zika last year. You go to meetings, which is one of the fun parts. I get to go to a fair amount of conferences. You learn about the impending global doom that we've got from yellow fever or Powassan, or you go to antibiotic resistance meetings and learn about the dearth of antibiotics that exist right now for some bacteria. So you get to learn a lot. And again, you take it back in and decide what you're going to be making, what kind of products you have to develop going forth. Challenge is prioritization, because we deal not only with clinical, but we also deal with food microbiology, we deal with industrial microbiology, there's all sorts of different areas, and it's fascinating to be able to talk to researchers that are experts, global experts in all these different areas, and try and balance the needs of everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I guess, the things that are exciting are kind of why I've stayed with the research sciences. I've always loved discovering new things, and that's why I never wanted to kind of get away from doing experiments. Obviously, over time, your career changes, you're doing more management and training of people, and I really enjoy that part. And another exciting thing about Brucella is there's the potential for a lot of international collaborations, and so we've been working on that recently, and I really enjoyed that. And just having a chance to kind of adapt some new techniques or collaborate with somebody to apply it to our lab, I think that's exciting. Challenges are, we're starting a new disease that I haven't worked on before, so kind of your typical setting up lab types of things. To some extent, since we're in a group, that's helpful because there's already people working, you're not starting from scratch. But I'm trying to do a variety of molecular things we haven't set up there, so just getting all those things ramped up, and just your average lab challenges of why are the cells not growing properly types of things, these types of things that are always happen. But one of the things, I'd say a lot of the things are tied in because things that are exciting are also challenging, right? So I really like training new people and collaborating, but those things are by nature challenging to do them well, right? And so I'm not always doing them perfectly, but the idea is to keep learning and improving as I go. And so, I think maybe when you're younger, you think there might be a place where everything, it'll just be working smoothly, but it feels like you're always learning new things. But that's the exciting part of science to me, is that you're always learning something new, and there's always an opportunity to improve, and I like that.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience or from Facebook?
Question about the scientific review officer position. What kind of a qualification should you have to apply for this position? Can you do it after a PhD or postdoc, or do you have to have been a faculty like yourself for several years? And I have the second part of my question to you is, what percentage of the job involves doing science, and what percentage is administrative?
Those are very good questions. I would say yes, have a PhD, have some experience writing grants. And in fact, those were the qualifications to even get past administrative review to be interviewed. So yes, this is the people who are SROs are experienced investigators in their own right. I would say I'm not in that position of hiring SROs. I can only say what it was like, as an applicant. But those were the things that were asked of me. Have you applied for grants? Have you been a principal investigator of grants? Have you reviewed grants? Have you been a reviewer on a panel? And are you internationally and nationally recognized as an expert in your field? So that was important for them to as a criteria. And so it's something that you can't do right out of, you can't get a PhD and suddenly be an SRO. To my knowledge, my SRG, my chief is in the audience here, but SROs are highly experienced experts in their own field and have quite a lot of experience in the field. So it is something that you want to consider more down the road, but if it is something that you're interested in, it's kind of nice because you keep going, keep trying, get your postdoc, do your get a faculty position, apply for grants, get them, and it's something that you can think of down the line if that appeals to you. And a lot of the job is science because that's what I really love about it is I read through all the grants that are in my panel. And I have to ascertain what type of expertise I need for that, for those applications, and I have to organize them into what expertise, and then I have to think of the experts in the field and how do they match up with these applications. And so it's a great deal of science. I don't think that someone without a background in science and specifically in microbiology could do the panel I'm doing. And in addition, you have to really understand chemistry and all facets of science to be able to do the panels, to match up the expertise, because you never know what's going to show up in your panel.
Any more questions?
So, coming from the United States Department of Agriculture, would you consider that to be a federal position? Yeah.
Yes.
So, in terms of publishing information, do you feel as though there's a key difference between publishing data from because I know there's a lot of secrecy usually involved, so there's not as much sharing, I guess, with like a government job, right?
Yeah, so the question related to publishing. So we do have a publication requirement as part of our requirements for the job, and I would say publishing is pretty similar to faculty publishing at my agency, or at least in my center. So I work for the Agricultural Research Service, so we basically kind of consider the in-house research branch of the USDA. We do have a process. If we have a paper, then, and this was true at the NIH as well, you have to basically have it checked by your unit supervisor before you submit it. So there's paperwork involved, but we submit to journals like I would in another position. You can submit anywhere, ASM journals, other journals. And in terms of other public things, so we do have, like, for each person who works in my center, there's a page where it lists all their publications, and we also do make short, I would call them little blurbs, about kind of a summary for anyone who could read about what's in our work, so it's supposed to be more free of jargon. So we do have that online as well to share about what we're doing, and then we go to conferences and things like that. So I guess I would say that I don't think there's a big difference in publication, and indeed publication is really important. So as I said, when we're evaluated each year, we do have a requirement for content and numbers of publications, and then to advance in the agency, we have different evaluation levels, and what they look at as one of the key things is your publication record in peer-reviewed journals. So,
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. So in terms of before you moved into your current position, did any of you take any time to explore your career options?
To explore.
Yes. So did you try to figure out, well, what can I do with this degree that I'm getting at any point?
Well, I was at the University of Chicago after I got my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
I was in academia for 23 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that they treated me really well there. But one thing that they didn't do there was all of my salary support was dependent upon grants.
Mm-hmm.
And so, however, as a research faculty, that's another career, and that's basically what I was at the University of Chicago. It's a great place to work there because they 100% covered my children's tuition, college tuition.
Whoa.
And so I grandfathered in with 100%. They're now decreasing it to 85%, but it's still, they treated me well while I was there, but there came a time when I saw down the road, when will they possibly not cover my grants? And I was actually fully covered at the time, but it was great to write grants. It was great to explore hypotheses. It was great to have a lab. It was great, to have students. But at some point, going to the NIH and, being a part of the grant review process seemed like a very nice option.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things that I did before really qualified me
helped
to
you.
do that. So it was a kind of a nice place to, I'd say, go next.
Mm-hmm.
So I explored a lot, yes.
Yes. Did for the ones that have the PhDs on this panel, were there any misgivings in terms of leaving academia or sort of not going the tenure route? Well, you kind of did already, but then you ended up leaving. So.
yeah, I guess for me, when I kind of thought about where I wanted to be, I thought about the things that were really important and the things that weren't as critical. And I decided by kind of seeing options and different careers, that what was critical is staying in some sort of research science. And I had tried some other things, so I worked for a year doing outreach and extension, and I really enjoyed it. But I knew from that time that I wanted to do that as part of my work, but I also wanted to have the outreach component, or research component. So I think that what was critical to me was not necessarily the venue or the academic track, but certain elements of the position. So I was really open to things that had those elements, whether they were at an academic or government setting or industry setting. So that was what was most important to me when I was thinking about things.
Do you see any differences between government and industry, or?
I mean, I can't really speak to that myself because I haven't worked. I've spent a lot of time in academia and I've spent a lot of time in government, but I haven't really worked directly in industry. I've collaborated with industry, but I haven't worked in industry. What I would say is a lot of folks will say that, government has some elements of both. I mean, I think the team-based work, not that there's not this in academia, because there certainly is, but the nature of the research teams, I think, probably has some features that are similar to industry, and also kind of the structure of the agency, because we have a unit head, and I think some of those things are similar. But in terms of the publications and kind of the day-to-day research, there's kind of maybe a hybrid, I would say, between academia and industry. But that's just my perception. So I don't want to speak too much to the industry side.
Oh, I meant, what about with academia and government? Sorry. With academia and government, do you see any differences there?
Yeah, I guess I would say, I mean, from the structure, right?
Yeah.
So, again, it's not true in all academic environments, but I think you think of an academic lab, often you think of one person at the top, and then there's a large group of people working. The government setup, at least in my center, is different. So we have a smaller group in terms of personnel, but we do have that collaborative between folks with different types of expertise. I think that's really interesting. And then we also have a unit head who is sort of like a department head, but not really, because he also does experiments as part of my group. And so it's just a little bit different type of setup. In terms of, I mean, certainly that in my position, we don't have teaching requirements. So when I was at Frostburg, I was spending a lot of time teaching, and I enjoyed that. And then in my USDA position, we do public engagement in certain ways, and there's opportunities to do a guest lecture and things like that. But obviously, that's not part of it. Publication-wise, as I said, it's somewhat similar. We do try to do things that have some practical focus and try to, so it depends on the group, but a lot of folks are interested at USDA in coming to a product from their work, or developing a vaccine or diagnostic tool. And of course that happens academia, but I think maybe we're a little more practical focused.
And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it is a lot different working for the government compared to academia. However, as an SRO, you're still given a lot of freedom to continue to do lectures if you want to. You have to get permission from an ethics board before you can do that, especially if there's any kind of compensation involved. But there's still freedom as an SRO, even though you're reviewing grants at this point and you're not in academia. They encourage you to continue with your academic development. In fact, they encourage coming to conferences like this. They just encourage things like that. And so, of course, you just have to get approvals for it. But it's a great career in that respect, is that you continue your scientific development just in a different kind of way.
And mainly, you said with conferences. That's how you can build your scientific development.
You can go to conferences, or you can still give lectures, in your field. Again, you just have to get the approvals to do it.
Okay. So what's something you would lecture on in your field?
Well, my expertise was in Staphylococcus aureus and antibiotic resistance and antibiotic development. So I would probably lecture, but I also had a class before. I also taught a class. Okay. And it was called Plagues, Past and Present. So I could give lectures on all kinds of plagues and infectious diseases and Zika, but I don't know that much about Zika, honestly, in terms of firsthand, but I'm more of a bacteriologist. But so I would give lectures on especially the things that I'm more expert at, like antibiotic development and resistance and MRSA and some basic science as well.
Do we have any questions online or in the crowd? Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering with USDA or with any other government research, how do you get funding for your research? Do you have to apply for it, or they just give you a set amount?
Yeah, it's a good question about the funding. So the way it works for my project, and I think there's similarities to NIH, but you can maybe talk more about the intramural part. But for my project, basically we have a review cycle. So there is money that's appropriated for the project, but we do have to go through an internal review. So for example, every few years we'll write up a project plan. And so currently we had a project plan that was reviewed internally and externally, and that says these are the things we're planning on doing, and it's aligned to the national priorities related to Brucella. And then so it's reviewed, and if it gets a good enough score, then we'll receive the money. And so there's going to be differences depending on the project. And so there are opportunities as well to receive external funding, but we're not required to do that. So in terms of our public health type of work, we're interested in collaborating internationally with Brucella, so doing some research on prevalence with local partners. That work, we're looking for some external grants. Certainly there are some restrictions, so not all grants. Like for example, if you look online at NIH grants, a lot of them are restricted. So, federal people like us would not be able to apply, which makes sense, right? Because we're already receiving federal money in other ways. Other ways you can, there's other types of grants, corporate grants, et cetera. Some folks at our center have those as well to basically provide extra funding for new projects. So I guess I would say yes, we received the federal funding, and you can apply for some extra, but you don't have to. So I think there can be, some pluses to that in the sense we finished our project plan, so we have a sense of this is what we're working on the next 5 years, and it's exciting, and we can kind of plan ahead for that.
Okay, any more questions?
From Facebook, from Carolina Stack. She doesn't say where she was at first, but she used to work in microbiology in her country, and now she works in the EU in biochemistry, and she's asking if you need a PhD to work in microbiology in general. If you could speak to that.
Do you want
I'm
to take
the
that one,
non-PhD
Cindy?
person here. I think it depends on what you consider microbiology, and microbiology is such a broad and vast field, so many different applications. When I go again and talk to customers, yes, many of my customers heading groups in industry or pharma, those areas do have PhDs, and they're filling certain roles within the company, either developing new products or running quality control labs, that sort of thing. And those certainly do require a strong background in research, PhD. But there's a lot of masters, people with a general interest in science. They went through and at the end of their master's program decided that they really didn't want to spend the next 5+ years as a lab person going through that. So there's a lot of jobs in areas for management in microbiology, certainly as well as research. And again, I have my bachelor's and have been able to stay in microbiology for many years, looking at it from an industry perspective, still keeping up on the science and being involved in development of new techniques and new products. So I think it entirely depends on what you're looking for, and what fits your lifestyle.
Yeah. So in terms of the bachelor's level, what kind of jobs do people typically have in your company with a bachelor's degree?
If you wanted to be in lab work, it would be as research assistants. There's certainly also quality positions, getting into production, that sort of if you are looking at true research, I would say that yes, you do need to focus on an area and have an expertise as you come in. And that is one of the things when I look at how ATCC hires, you are asked to, exhibit a knowledge of current techniques and,
Okay.
areas of science. So in that case, many times a master's will get you farther. When I was undergrad, again, if you didn't want to go into academia, you didn't have to have, anything other than bachelor's, and you could work your way up through the clinical labs, getting a medical technology degree, or moving into other certification that got you into areas.
Yeah, I certainly know when I was at the University of Chicago, the clinical laboratories had microbiologists staffed fully with microbiologists. They were career microbiologists. And people in the laboratory, research technicians, technologists, they had their expertise in microbiology as well.
Any others?
So as students were trained to be experts in technical and subject-based matter, what do you see the value in? So as students, we don't get trained in managerial leadership. So what advice do you have for students to attain that, and do you think it's a relevant skill to have?
Yeah, I think that's really critical. When I was in graduate school, I did a lot of public outreach. And at the time, sometimes people would question, is that a good use of time? And I was mostly doing it because I really loved it. But over time, I've really seen how useful that is. I've met a lot of people in a range of capacities, education, science, through that work. And then I think you also gain skills as you go, and communication and planning. I think one thing it's helped me with is kind of event planning or project planning, so a lot of similar threads. And I guess I would say in terms of advice for getting the skills, I think there's certainly formal ways like courses and things like that, but then also being deliberate to think about ways things could integrate. So, when I, for example, have a new student coming, like mentoring a summer student, I've done that for many years, and using that as a way to kind of test out skills or practice, so thinking ahead, okay, I'm going to make a plan for the student. Maybe you could make actually even a little guide for the lab for new students, kind of thinking about some of those training functions. And then I think another thing that's helpful is to also look for opportunities to professionalize some of that. Obviously we have limited time, but this came up yesterday. We did a workshop on science outreach for microbiologists. And one of the themes that was mentioned is the power of evaluating. So you are doing this type of work, we're all busy, these are all side projects in a lot of cases, but people have published that work or even or done a poster about it. So sort of professionalizing how you're obtaining those other skills and showing that these are some other skills that you have. I think that is really important because a lot of the time, I do experiments in the lab, but I spend more and more of my time, training, coordinating. I think one of my most important functions right now in my lab is project management because we have so many projects and many of them are very complicated with lots of different people. I think that's probably one of the most important skills. So certainly I need the underlying science part, right? And that's incredibly critical, but I think having some of those other skills, I have taken some classes, but a lot of it is sort of those informal experiences kind of built in. So that's what I would advocate for.
Out myself as a non-scientist trying to read this question, but this is from Nose Wayne. Regarding future aspects, is it worth doing an MRes in clinical microbiology, or should I pursue an MSc?
MSc.
Master of Science?
Yeah, Master's of Science, and then MRes?
Master of Research? Yes?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Master of Research.
I'm not
Is
sure
that
if
Master of Research?
Is it shorthand for like medical residency, or?
I could be wrong because it may not be.
Or
It sounds like a
medical.
non-U.S. degree, but
Yeah,
so
like
I'm guessing that he or she is asking about research masters versus a class-based masters with more practical classes. Is that seem reasonable?
Probably yes.
Next question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I don't have a lot of experience leading a clinical laboratory, so I'm not sure. I mean, what I would say for my work, so we study, pathogen microbiology. So from a more research perspective, I think it's really important to have a master's degree that has research component, so that you have those practical experiences. But I don't want to speak towards clinical micro.
Yeah.
So when I have dealt with clinical customers and in the conferences, looking at the managers and the challenges they face, a lot of it is business based. They're being asked to do return on investments for new technologies and managing the actual costs and how do you anticipate what is your cost structure going to be versus your reimbursement structure and so forth. So to me, that's a lot of applied sciences, business, looking at technologies and putting it in a financial format. So I took courses in an MBA and learned that area, and I think that is very valuable if you want to look at going forward in a career that will involve some sort of management within a organization, again, where you are managing budgets, and that could be both clinical as well as industrial, pharma.
I mean, one thing I always do and have told my students that I mentor is to try to look at some job postings or look at or talk to people who are in that position, not as a formal interview, but as an informational interview, and find out what experience they have. It's not to say that you couldn't get there with a different type of degree or things like that, but so when they may ask me questions, I'm not as sure. So let's find some examples. Let's find someone to talk to. They can give you some specialized experience if you have a sense of where you're going. And even if you don't, it's still helpful to explore what are some options and what are the degree or what are the skills that I need. I know that's been helpful to me to look at, even way before you apply, what do the job postings look like? I think that's very valuable.
Okay.
I think when I was hiring people for the lab positions, I certainly looked favorably on people who had Masters of Sciences with a microbiology discipline. When I was looking at applicants, I would definitely give them an ear and an interview just to see where they were. And I hired people with masters, and they worked out really well. So I would say it can't hurt if you don't want to go the full PhD route and you're considering that. I think it might make you stand out in a pile of CVs. I would say it couldn't hurt at all.
I think it's an acknowledgement of a discipline of following through with the area of study and being able to show that you can delve in and apply a lot of concepts to things.
Okay. We have a question in the back.
So along those lines, I know as a PhD student at the university I go to, they push us in the academic industry, well not industry, but the academic realm. They want us to stay on academia, so there's not a lot of workshops or outreaches to actually give us more information on the industry side. So along the lines of education, in the route of a research PhD, do you think it's beneficial at all to take classes in business if you are interested in possibly going industry route in the future?
Can you take one?
I certainly do promote that idea because, again, I look at my colleagues and the ones that even head R&D spend most of their time on managing a department, budgets and so forth. And I work with them on the development of business cases, again, looking at return on investment and so forth. So once you get into a for-profit area, you're going to have to understand key business factors and the things that influence your position and your achievement of goals, and they are very quantifiable. It's not based on how many papers you put out, but literally how many products you've got out. Are they on time? Is it the right quality? A number of parameters there. So as I got into business, I do wish that I had been exposed to more basic business concepts, even at undergrad level, to have an idea as you go forward, what's involved in this.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming today. You've been watching Microbiology Careers, Which One is Right for You. I'd like to thank my guests, Susan, Cynthia, and Catherine. I also like to thank the people that are attending here and the watchers on Facebook. Please stay tuned for great programming from ASM Live Theater at Microbe 2017 in New Orleans. The next session is going to be Communicating Virology, a conversation with Islam Hussein and Vincent Rackaniello. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
They tell you to put your chin right there.
I became an ASM member in 1981.
95?
Since 2008.
I joined ASM in 1974.
I've been an ASM member for 41 years.
I first became a member in 1989. Seems like all my career.
I'm willing to bet it's a decade.
My first ASM was 1993. I still have a picture of me holding the program open, sitting on the hotel room bed, really excited because for the first time ever I saw my name in print associated with microbiology.
When I was a graduate student at Purdue in 1980, it was the thing. I mean, if you were going to be a microbiologist, you joined the ASM. It was just really that simple.
ASM is very special to me because I became a member in 2002, and when I first attended the meeting at Salt Lake City, Utah, I met my PhD thesis mentor, Dr. Arturo Casadevall. And so ASM kind of introduced me to the PhD world.
Definitely the most important thing is that ASM has provided me with a graduate fellowship. So they've helped support me during my graduate training. In addition, I've gotten a lot of networking opportunities and I've met a lot of really great people through ASM.
And we can share our work and connect, and they can teach me things that I don't know and I can teach them things that they don't know. And just that partnership and working together, that's what scientists do, to share your work. And it's the most exciting thing to learn about new projects.
ASM has actually done a whole lot of work and given me the kind of exposure I wouldn't have had if I'm not a member of ASM.
Many brains are better than one.
So it's a great thing. It's a really member-driven organization. I love that. I've always loved that.
Could make the bigger the better, the more the merrier.
You want to do microbiology, become a member.